Though shows usually stay on air for just a few years and movies are often a one-time experience, some of them manage to stick around forever in America's heart. Fans grow attached to characters, and before long, these fictional people feel like real friends. People we know inside and out, from their best qualities to their quirks and flaws. But like every big-time show, what hidden drama and rivalry bubbles up when the cameras stop rolling and the stage lights fade? Could Ron's strange dislike for Opie hint at something deeper going on behind the scenes? Stick around as we dive into why Ron Howard really couldn't stand him. The stars really did align. From 1960 to 1968, The Andy Griffith Show brought together not only a beloved regular cast, but also an array of guest stars. Some were already famous, while others rose to stardom later on. This classic American sitcom starred Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, running for 8 memorable seasons on CBS. The first 159 episodes aired in black and white, and the final 90 transitioned to color. Impressively, the show never dropped below 7th place in the seasonal Nielsen ratings and hit the #1 spot by its final season. Set in the fictional town of Mayberry, North Carolina, The Andy Griffith Show is centered on Sheriff Andy Taylor, played by Griffith. With his calm and practical wisdom, Sheriff Taylor always managed to keep the peace among the quirky folks in his small-town jurisdiction. Much of his job involved steering Mayberry's residents away from their own innocent but sometimes troublesome antics. The town was full of characters like Gomer Pyle, the gas station attendant, played by Jim Nabors, and Otis, the town drunk, played by Hal Smith, who would humorously lock himself in jail after his weekly night out and let himself out when he'd sobered up. Andy's cousin and sidekick, Deputy Barney Fife, played by Don Knotts, was a well-meaning but overzealous officer whose antics often complicated their cases. Knotts shone in the role, winning 4 Emmy Awards before he left the show in 1965, with Jack Burns stepping in afterward. Alongside these stories, we watch Taylor's attempts at fathering his adventurous son, Opie, played by a young Ron Howard, and managing the amusing escapades of his Aunt Bee, the family's loving but sometimes meddlesome housekeeper, played by Frances Bavier. The Andy Griffith Show fit right in with a 1960s TV trend that loved to spotlight funny, light-hearted country life and characters. It was so popular that it inspired 2 spin-offs: Gomer Pyle, USMC, which ran from 1964 to 1969, and Mayberry, RFD, airing from 1968 to 1971. While the show itself and Andy Griffith didn't snag any awards during its 8-season run, co-stars Don Knotts and Frances Bavier together picked up an impressive 6 Emmy Awards. There was even a reunion movie, Return to Mayberry, that aired in 1986, bringing fans back to the beloved small-town charm. But what was the vibe between the main stars behind the scenes? Who got along and who didn't? Stick with us as we dive into the juicy details of who clashed with whom and why. The drama on The Andy Griffith Show didn't stop at the screen. It was alive and well behind the scenes, too. Even though the show ended in 1968, fans still can't get enough of it, including all the off-camera antics that went on. And yes, this wholesome 60s classic had its fair share of mischief, much of it led by the show's star himself, Andy Griffith. So what was Andy like off-screen? Although he played the calm, sensible sheriff on the show, Griffith was actually a big fan of practical jokes. He loved to stir things up, especially when it came to teasing his friend Don Knotts. One of his favorite pranks? Dropping a metal film canister on the floor right as Knotts was napping. And Don wasn't the only one to get his naps interrupted. George Goober Lindsay once woke up to find that Griffith had strung duck guts all around his dressing room. But the cast didn't let Andy have all the fun. Once, they got their own revenge by swiping his shoes, leaving him to wear his hefty sheriff's boots all the way home. This playful spirit even spilled over into the show's episodes. In one scene from the Runaway Kid episode, Opie and his friends pull a prank on Sheriff Taylor by moving his car in front of a fire hydrant so he'd get a ticket. Originally, Don Knotts was only signed up for 1 episode, but after seeing him in action, executive producer Sheldon Leonard was instantly hooked on his chemistry with Griffith. Knotts' contract quickly went from 1 episode to a year and then to 5 seasons. And here's a fun fact. The famous theme song, which everyone knows from the show's opening whistle, is actually called The Fishin' Hole. It was composed by Earl Hagen and Herbert Spencer, with Hagen himself doing the whistling. Although it's wordless on the show, it actually had lyrics, and Griffith even recorded a version with the words. And as for young Ron Howard, despite how it looked, he couldn't actually throw a rock into the lake. In the show's opening theme, little Ron Howard, credited as Ronnie back then, strolls along a lake with Andy Griffith and tosses a rock, making that iconic splash in the water. But here's the real story. When they filmed those opening credits at Franklin Canyon in Los Angeles, 6-year-old Howard just couldn't get the rock to reach the lake. After a few failed throws, assistant director Bruce Bilson had a prop guy step in to make the splash at the right moment. So as Opie pretends to throw the rock, it's actually the prop man who makes it hit the water. If you re-watch that scene, you might even catch a tiny delay between Opie's throw and the splash. And as if that wasn't impressive enough, the Andy Griffith Show went off the air while it was still the #1 show on TV. Now that's how you make an exit. Here are some interesting tidbits you might not know about the Andy Griffith Show. Originally, the show's creator Sheldon Leonard wanted to drop Andy's name from the title. He thought it'd be better just to call it Mayberry, but by that time, the title had already stuck. Funny enough, Mayberry wasn't even the town's first name. It was originally supposed to be called Mount Pilot. Andy himself confirmed that fact. And speaking of real-life connections, Andy's actual wife, Barbara, made a small cameo in an episode called Barney and the Choir. And Frances Bavier, who became famous as Aunt Bee, played a different character in the pilot, a local widow named Mrs. Henrietta Perkins. When it came to the show's female characters, Peggy, one of Andy's lesser-known love interests, had a unique claim to fame. She was the first woman on the show to wear pants. You'll spot her breaking that little fashion barrier in Opie's Rival. Betty Lynn, who played Thelma Lou, eventually made a big move, too. After attending Mayberry Days in Mount Airy, North Carolina, the real-life town that inspired Mayberry, she fell in love with the place. After her LA home was burglarized, she decided to move to Mount Airy in 2006. Frances Bavier, Aunt Bee, also retired nearby, moving to Siler City, North Carolina in 1972, where she enjoyed the scenic roads and trees she'd come to love. If you look closely in Sheriff Andy's office, you'll spot some upside-down maps of Idaho and Nevada hanging behind his desk. A little geographical mix-up in this North Carolina-inspired town. Even though Griffith often downplayed the connection, it's clear that his hometown of Mount Airy had a special influence on the fictional Mayberry. In the episode A Black Day for Mayberry, there's a little Easter egg. Barney grabs a phone book from the sheriff's desk, and if you look closely, you'll see Mount Airy on the cover. It seems they used a real phone book from Mount Airy, North Carolina, Andy Griffith's actual hometown. One mystery remains unsolved to this day, though. A character known as Mr. Schwamp, a silent resident of Mayberry who shows up in 26 episodes, has never been identified. He even made it into a few episodes of Mayberry RFD as in the Gomer Pyle USMC and once in the movie The Christmas in Connecticut. Though fans once claimed to reveal his identity, it turned out to be just an April Fool's prank. Mayberry had its fair share of quirky characters, and one of them, Nice Dress Nellie, was another mystery. It turns out she was a stand-in for Don Knotts, which makes her a unique behind-the-scenes hero of the show. In early episodes, Andy would sometimes call Barney his cousin, but as the season continued, this reference disappeared, and they were never mentioned as family again. Meanwhile, on the show, Barney had a nickname for Andy, Ange, which combined Andy and Griffith. Funny enough, this was actually Griffith's real-life nickname among friends, including Knotts. In real life, Andy and Don Knotts were the opposite of their on-screen personas. Andy was actually more reserved and serious, while Knotts, who played the bumbling Barney, was known for being surprisingly serious off-camera. Imagine the straight-laced Barney in real life. It's a bit of a shock, right? In the Andy Griffith Show's opening theme, Andy and Opie walk along the water, and Andy gives a nod of approval when Opie throws a rock into the lake. This simple gesture, however, carries a deeper meaning. It's inspired by Andy Griffith's own father, who would nod in the same way to show approval. This little detail highlights how much Griffith valued authenticity and portraying fatherhood on screen. Ron Howard, who played Opie, also drew from his own life for the show. His father, Rance Howard, was an actor as well, and the two had a close bond. In fact, Ron has often said that Andy and Opie's on-screen relationship was partly modeled after his own with his father. Known for bringing his family into his work, Ron later collaborated with his father on various projects, reflecting the strong relationship and family-oriented values both Griffith and Howard shared. This father-son connection shines through, adding warmth to their roles and creating a bond viewers can feel through the screen. Andy Griffith, widely recognized for his role as Sheriff Andy Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show, had a rich musical background that significantly shaped his career. His journey in music began in childhood when he sang and played the slide trombone in his church band at Grace Moravian Church in Mount Airy, North Carolina. He went on to earn a music degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, eventually teaching high school music before embarking on his acting career. Griffith's musical talents came to the forefront during his Broadway debut in 1958 with Destry Rides Again, earning him a Tony nomination for Best Actor in a Musical. His film debut in A Face in the Crowd, 1957, showcased his singing abilities as well, with Griffith playing a jailbird who also had musical aspirations. Throughout The Andy Griffith Show, Griffith's love for music was evident, with him performing in several episodes. In 1998, he reflected on the importance of music to the series. He released various albums over the years featuring country and gospel music, including a version of the show's theme song, originally titled The Fishin' Hole. This song was performed with lyrics written by Griffith, although the iconic whistled theme was actually created by co-writer Earl Hagen. Griffith's musical influence continued with his role in the legal drama Matlock, where he sang in various episodes. His passion for music culminated in the 1996 release of I Love to Tell the Story, 25 Timeless Hymns, which won a Grammy Award for Best Southern Gospel, Country Gospel, or Bluegrass Gospel Album. This recognition marked yet another highlight in Griffith's extensive musical career, showcasing his enduring talent and love for music. In 1999, Griffith got a shiny new accolade when he was welcomed into the Country Gospel Music Hall of Fame. Then, in 2007, he made his mark in the Christian Music Hall of Fame and Museum, too. Fast forward to just a few years ago, and the guy from North Carolina teamed up with country star Brad Paisley for the music video of Waitin' on a Woman. That video ended up snagging the Country Music Association's award for Video of the Year. Pretty cool, right? Now about Knott's, he didn't stick around for the long haul. After everyone thought the show was done after its 5th season, Knott's quickly found new gigs. But when Griffith decided to come back for a 6th season, Knott's was on board too, but with a catch. He wanted a piece of the ownership pie. Griffith said no, and that's when Knott's decided he wouldn't reprise his role as Barney. Now let's talk about Bavier. She had this love-hate thing going on with her famous character throughout the show. As a New York actress, she felt like her serious acting chops weren't getting the spotlight they deserved. Still, after playing Aunt Bee for 8 seasons, she was the only original cast member to carry on in the spin-off, Mayberry RFD, for another 2 seasons. On set, Bavier was known to be a bit sensitive, and the crew learned to tiptoe around her. Even Griffith admitted that they didn't always see eye to eye during filming. In fact, during an appearance on Larry King Live in November 2003, Griffith shared that Bavier called him just 4 months before she passed away to say sorry for being difficult while they worked together. In an interview with Bill Ballard for Carolina Camera, Bavier opened up about how tricky it can be for an actress to create a character that people only see her as, making her feel like her true self was kind of lost in the shuffle. Aunt Bee, the beloved character on the show, was often thought to be a bit serious and not much of a jokester. Frances Bavier, the actress behind Aunt Bee, came from a pretty posh background in New York City. She led a fancy life, went to Columbia University, and trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts before landing her role on The Andy Griffith Show. Throughout much of the show, things were a bit tense between Andy and Frances since he was always cracking jokes while she wasn't a fan of his playful antics. Thankfully, before Bavier passed away in 1989, they managed to patch things up. She even called him to apologize for being difficult during filming, which is lovely to hear. It shows that despite their on-screen dynamics, the cast genuinely cared for one another. Frances played Aunt Bee for a solid 10 years and snagged an Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Comedy Actress in 1967. After she retired in 1972, she led a pretty private life until her death in 1989. She lived alone in a big 2-story house in Siler City, which she rarely left. Most of her time was spent in a sparsely furnished back room, which just had a bed, a desk, a TV, and an end table filled with black licorice and her glasses. Definitely not the typical lifestyle you'd expect. Interestingly, many viewers didn't realize that the close relationship between Don and Andy on the show mirrored their real-life friendship. Both Griffith and Knotts grew up during the Great Depression and faced tough times. Griffith's family was so poor that instead of a crib, he slept in dresser drawers as a baby. On the other hand, Knotts grew up in West Virginia, one of 4 boys in his family, which also meant a life of limited means. One of the standout features of the Andy Griffith Show has to be its iconic opening credits, complete with that catchy whistled tune and the sweet image of Andy and young Opie heading off for a fishing trip. This classic scene was shot at Franklin Canyon Park, right at the eastern tip of the Santa Monica Mountains. The cast had their own favorite episodes, too. Andy Griffith really liked Barney's first car from Season 3, where Barney blows all his savings on a clunky old car that turns out to be a dud. Ron Howard, who played Opie, favored the episode The Ball Game, which was actually written by his dad, Rance Howard. Rance was involved in writing and acting in 5 different episodes, so it's no wonder Ron had a special connection to that one. Over its run from 1960 to 1968, an incredible 249 episodes of The Andy Griffith Show were produced. One episode that many fans adore is The Pickle Story, which Don Knotts loved as well. In this hilarious episode, Aunt Bee makes a massive batch of pickles that are so awful Barney dubs them kerosene cucumbers. Thanks to a funny twist, Andy and Barney find themselves having to eat 8 quarts of those disgusting pickles, and you can see they're genuinely cracking up while filming. The chemistry between Andy and Don was so impressive that the producers jumped at the chance to keep them together. They whipped up a contract on the spot, first for a year and then for another 5. Griffith once said, "The second episode was called Manhunt, and I knew right then that Don should be the comic and I should play it straight for him." That made all the difference. And what a duo they became, one of the best partnerships in TV history. The classic squad car that Andy and Barney drove around in the Andy Griffith Show was a Ford Galaxy. How cool is that? A local Ford dealership hooked them up with a new Galaxy for free every time a new model was released. They would take back the old car, give it a fresh coat of paint, and then sell it off. Honestly, if the dealer had thought it through a bit more, he could have raked in even more cash by selling the cars just as they were. Throughout the show's 8 seasons, a total of 10 different Galaxies were used, and you can find plenty of replicas floating around today. The show had a close relationship with Ford Motor Company, which is why the squad cars were always those classic Ford Galaxy 500 sedans. And guess what? The credits even thanked Ford for their support. But funnily enough, the actual sole sponsor for the entire series was General Foods. Now let's talk about Gomer Pyle. That lovable goofball from Mayberry was brought to life by Jim Neighbors. After the Andy Griffith Show wrapped up, Jim got his own spin-off called Gomer Pyle, USMC, where Gomer joins the Marines. Not only was he a great comedic actor, but he also had an amazing singing voice and recorded 28 albums throughout his career. And here's a juicy bit of gossip. While Andy and Annetta Corsott played a couple on the show, there are whispers that they were real-life lovers. This was while Andy was still married to his first wife, Barbara. Scandalous, right? Andy eventually got divorced in 1972 and went on to marry twice more, first to Greek actress Solisa Casuto and then to Cindy Knight. Annetta, however, never tied the knot or had kids of her own. During one of the cast's many practical jokes, a crew member dressed up as a waiter and headed to Andy's hotel room to deliver dinner. But surprise, surprise, he walked in on Andy and Annetta Corsott in a rather compromising situation. Whoops! Let's just say that prank didn't land quite as intended, definitely went over like a lead balloon. It seems the Andy Griffith Show was just another notch in Hollywood's belt of secret romances back in the 60s, which wasn't all that rare for the time. Did you know that the sitcom never provided us with a glimpse of Opie's mother? It comes as yet another surprise. She is only mentioned once, and that is in the episode that is titled Wedding Bells for Aunt Bee. Andy experiences a surge of emotion as he contemplates the depth of his affection for Opie's mother. When it comes to anything else, viewers are left in the dark because there are no photographs or any other information. From the flip side of the coin, there was a certain amount of history on The Danny Thomas Show, which was the show from which The Andy Griffith Show sprang. Opie is informed by Andy that his mother passed away when he was nothing more than the least little speck of a baby. Let's bring up the topic of the name Opie. In point of fact, it features a delightful sound link. The name originates from Opie Cates, who was a well-known bandleader throughout the 1930s and 1940s. Andy Griffith and Sheldon Leonard, who were producer of the show, placed a significant amount of importance on his music. To show their respect for him, they thought it would be wonderful. As Richie Cunningham from Happy Days and Opie Taylor from The Andy Griffith Show, Ron Howard will forever be remembered by the public for his roles in both characters. In the context of this discussion, Ron is no longer merely a well-known kid actor. He is now also a well-known director. He is the recipient of a number of prizes, one of which being the National Medal of Arts. The year 2013 marked the year that he was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame. 2 stars have been bestowed upon him on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. What a triumph it has been! Between the years 1975 and 1975, Ron has been married to Cheryl Alley, a writer. Through their union, they have been blessed with 4 lovely offspring, including 2 daughters who have also achieved fame as actresses and twin girls. In all honesty, Opie has done a fantastic job for himself. Annetta Corsaw had a fascinating educational experience throughout her life. The character of Helen Crump, Sheriff Andy Taylor's girlfriend, was one that she played on The Andy Griffith Show. In order to pursue her goals of becoming an actress, she initially enrolled at Northwestern University with the intention of studying theater. Nevertheless, her thirst for knowledge did not stop there. During the time that the show was being filmed, she continued her study at UCLA, completing her coursework while simultaneously advancing her profession. The job that Annetta did on The Andy Griffith Show was not the only thing that she was known for. Return to Mayberry, which aired in 1986, and The Andy Griffith Show Reunion, which aired in 1993, were the 2 reunion shows in which she appeared. She has appeared in a large number of other television shows, including Gunsmoke, Rich Man, Poor Man, and The Runaways, all of which are considered to be among the best. Unfortunately, Annetta passed away in 1995 due to cancer, and she is laid to rest in Hollywood. Health issues were a defining characteristic of Andy Griffith's life. In 1983, he was forced to fight with Guillain-Barré syndrome, but fortunately, he was able to recover. Later, in the year 2000, he underwent surgery to bypass 4 of his hearts. In spite of the fact that he passed away in 2012 due to a heart attack, he left behind a reputation that established him as one of the most significant performers of his era. It was on Roanoke Island in North Carolina, a site that he cherished, that he was laid to rest. Throughout his life, Andy was honored with a number of accolades, including earning a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and being inducted into the Television Hall of Fame in the year 1991. The largest collection of Andy Griffith memorabilia in the world may be seen at the Andy Griffith Museum, which is located in North Carolina. It recognizes the impact he had on television. In the early episodes of the show, it was revealed that Andy and Barney were cousins. This was an intriguing truth about the beginning of the show, which was originally shown in the first few episodes. By making this humorous reference, the author was attempting to poke fun at assumptions about Southern family ties and how they may assist individuals in obtaining employment in small-town administration. The concept was discussed on multiple occasions, but in the end it was not pursued further. However, they ended up being lifelong friends. There was an event that took place during the production of the 2nd season of The Andy Griffith Show that revealed a more violent side of Andy Griffith. As a result of his rage, he struck a wall, which resulted in the severe injury of his hand, which ultimately required extensive bandaging while the movie was being shot. In order to conceal the origin of the injuries, the filmmakers concocted a story that Sheriff Taylor had injured himself when he was attempting to apprehend criminals. Rather than claiming that he lost control of his fury, this imaginative explanation sounds like it would be a lot more courageous. The clothes that Don Knotts always wore were another intriguing aspect of the program that I found to be interesting. The fact that Barney Fife usually wore a white straw cap, a salt and pepper patterned coat, and a red bow tie is something that fans of the actor will remember. Because Knotts enjoyed this ensemble so much, he wore it in a number of additional films, including How to Frame a Fig, The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, The Reluctant Astronaut, and the incredible Mr. Limpet, among others. This one-of-a-kind style became a representation of who he was and served as a showcase for his great sense of style. Having said that, not every friendship that was depicted on the show was simple. Eleanor Donahue provided the performance of Betty. However, she left the show after only one season due to the fact that she did not get along with Griffith on screen. After some time had passed, he revealed that due to the fact that it was difficult for him to exhibit affection during shooting, they had lost touch. After the first season, both parties came to the conclusion that it would be more beneficial to quit the relationship than to continue with it when it was not producing the desired results. The fact that Andy and Opie, two well-known characters, made their debut in the pilot episode of Danny Thomas's sitcom Make Room for Daddy is an intriguing fact. They moved from being a test to being the Andy Griffith Show, which was broadcast for the first time in October of 1960, and the fact that they were connected demonstrates how swiftly they proceeded from that point. It was the ideal time for the show, and it swiftly made its way to the top of the television ratings, becoming a beloved classic that won over millions of viewers. In addition to being the star of the television show The Andy Griffith Show, Andy Griffith was also a successful businessman. When he first became interested in film, he consented to take part in the show that was produced by Sheldon Leonard and Danny Thomas, but only on the condition that he would be able to keep 50% of the ownership. The conclusion of this transaction was that he would be able to secure his rights to 50% of the show, which would ultimately prove to be financially beneficial. As of the time of his dying, Griffith had acquired a personal wealth that was estimated to be worth $60 million. Barney Fife, who was portrayed by Don Knotts, was given a hilarious portrayal in which he was only permitted to carry a single bullet in his gun. This was a somewhat lighthearted yet insightful component of the show. Andy's lack of confidence in Barney's capacity to manage a whole arsenal was the root cause of this restriction. Fans of the show, feeling compassion for Barney's predicament, mailed bullets to Don Knotts from all over the country. This gesture guaranteed that Knotts would never have to pay for ammo if he wanted to go to the shooting range, but it also made a hilarious implication that his character was frequently in over his head. In the course of his time on the program, Ron Howard, who played the role of Opie Taylor, encountered a different kind of difficulty. Due to the fact that his character's name rhymed with the word dopey, Howard was subjected to bullying despite the fact that he was a part of the most popular television series. Howard wrote in his book that he had written in 2012 that he frequently experienced feelings of embarrassment while he was an actor among his contemporaries. As a result, he chose to conceal his affiliation with The Andy Griffith Show. In spite of the fact that he acknowledged the one-of-a-kind experience of working on a program that was critically acclaimed and acknowledged the joy he felt in his achievements, he believed that it was something that should not be mentioned with other children. Despite the fact that the public cheered for Opie's development into a respectable young man in Mayberry, this inconsistency brought to light the pressures that come with popularity during childhood. We appreciate you watching. To view other videos, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on the videos.